This workshop is called Resisting 2010, No Olympics on Stolen Land. We have a bunch of fabulous speakers who've done a lot of activism work in Vancouver on this issue. First speaker is going to be Michael Vonn, who's the policy director for the BC Civil Liberties Association.
I'm going to give you the summarized and Proust version of civil liberties issues at the Olympics. Just so you know, we have no problem with people wearing shiny suits and catapulting themselves down a mountain. But we know that we have a bazillion civil liberties issues that are related to the Olympics, and they fall into three broad categories. One is freedom of expression, the other is privacy and surveillance, and finally police accountability. So I just want to give you an overview of all those areas, and then we can unpack them as we go, maybe with a little bit of dialogue. So in terms of freedom of expression, the big thing that you need to know to understand how this conflicts with what we typically think of as our charter rights in Canada is to understand Rule 51 in the Olympic Charter. The IOC's, that's the International Olympic Committee's Olympic Charter, Rule 51, limits host cities in terms of what they call advertising, demonstrations, and propaganda. And it states explicitly that there will be, here's the quote, no kind of demonstration or political, religious, or racial propaganda permitted in any Olympic site, venue, or other area. In the law, we refer to that as a wee bit broad. To respond as briefly as possible, it is virtually unthinkable to imagine the IOC's edict somehow meshing with the Canadian Charter of Rights in terms of our expressive freedom. In terms of free speech, they're pretty much directly opposed, and if you want to see that illustrated, you could look at the 90-page document that consists of the omnibus bylaws that the City of Vancouver just passed about a week and a half ago. That bylaw does things like designates over 40 downtown residential and commercial blocks as Olympic venues or sites. And in these zones, in the 3 months in surrounding the Olympics, access is restricted to people who consent to airport-like security screenings. It also provides that there will be no unlicensed signs permitted unless the signs celebrate the Olympics. The language of the provision is in fact so broad that their definition of sign clearly encompasses things like t-shirts, maybe body painting, tattoos, etc. The city has also called on the province to authorize the province, because they don't have enough jurisdiction, or they don't have enough authority under their current jurisdiction, to outlaw leaflets distributed that might offend the authorities and end up as litter. They're looking for a fine somewhere in the area of $10,000 per day for that kind of propaganda. The city's new Olympics bylaws, also relating to these special zones, prohibit causing any disturbance or nuisance that interferes with other people's enjoyment of the entertainment in these zones. Now, disturbance and nuisance is not defined in this, but you really don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that they're very unlikely to use this against people chanting "Rah, Rah, Olympics," right? Okay, so we see the suppression of non-celebratory speech also along the Olympic torch routes, which goes through several cities. According to VANOC, municipalities along torch routes are supposed to suppress commercial, promotional, or again, other forms of propaganda. And as far as we can make out, the only of the 30 municipalities that the torch route is going to go through, we've written to all of them asking them basically to explicitly express their support for the charter. One has done so to date. 1 out of 30 municipalities, and Vancouver is not among them. I can't remember off the top of my head. But yes, we celebrate them. So in answer to the $64 question, so are these proposed violations of free speech allowed under the Canadian Charter of Rights? Politicians who are responsible for passing these kinds of laws say absolutely they are charter compliant. Others, people who have an inkling about the charter perhaps, disagree. And when you're looking at that kind of disagreement, you're probably looking at a constitutional challenge, which we expect there will be one. In the meantime, we've got several other things that are happening in terms of free expression, suppression. VANOC, for example, has bought out all of the outdoor advertising in and around the Olympics period, which we say is a complete stonewalling of dissenting expression availability, and those sorts of things. But that just gives you a kind of a feel for that. Probably the most well-known aspect of free expression problems related to the Olympics are the so-called free speech zones. That's what the Olympic security people call them. The rest of the world calls them protest pens. The ISU, the Integrated Security Unit, has talked about these things as if they are a service to protesters, which I find fascinating, right? They're going to scope out the best places for protest. This is their notion. I love this. They got the PR people on this. The spin is fantastic. It's location, 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 people. We figured out where it is you want to protest. And we're just going to have some nice cameras there, and we're going to corral you in there, because it's really where you want to be. It's the happening spot, right? So they have said that there will be these fabulous sites that everybody will want to get in on, and you're going to want to be in on them because they're going to make a security perimeter around the venues that won't allow you to get any closer to the venues. So it really is, they claim, the prime piece of real estate that you're going to want to be on. They won't tell us where they are, what they are, how big they are, what kind of security is around them, nothing. All we know so far is that there will be some. So that's the fast and dirty version of what we got looking at in terms of free speech issues. And finally, police accountability, I want to say two things very quickly. One is that crowd control and the issues around crowd control are of great concern to civil libertarians, what this will look like and what methods are used. And we're also deeply concerned that the police will not, at this point, will not rule out the use of agent provocateurs. I don't know if you remember at the Security and Prosperity Partnership meeting that was held in Montebello in 2007. There was that very famous incident where they used agent provocateurs. Remember those huge 250-pound guys about 7 feet tall with all these skinny poet types and other, legitimate protesters doing peaceful stuff, trying to start a riot, trying to throw stones? Do you remember that? There was a YouTube video that was the sensation of the world, right? So they were found to actually be attempting to bring a legitimate police force excuse against otherwise peaceful protesters. The ISU and other security forces at the Olympics have not ruled out the use of that kind of provocative action, and we find that obviously despicable.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for that. Now we're going to hear from Chris Shaw.
A little bit about the official frame and the reality, and how that reality has shaped how we've seen the Olympics evolve over the last few years. So the official frame, you all know, you see it in the Vancouver Sun and the province, and it's all about the athletes, it's all about peace and brotherhood, it's all about kittens and rainbows and all those good things that we all love. And if you're against that, how could you be against kittens and rainbows? And I bet you kick puppies and you pull the wings off butterflies, and you're a terrible person. And by the way, you're a security threat. And so as we've looked at these things evolve, we've realized that it's really not about kittens and rainbows, it's about something very different. It's about a corporate assault on our communities. And it's the same anytime the Olympics comes to town. They always want something. It's not just the IOC, it's the local developers. Because what they have in their minds, they come to the local organizers are organizing around real estate. And all you have to do to demonstrate that to yourself is drive up the Sea to Sky Highway and see all the things that have sprouted along the Sea to Sky Highway, and think why Eagle Ridge had to be destroyed, and think about all the condo development between here and Whistler, and think about the stuff they're doing in the Callahan, because these are projects the developers wanted for many years. And the Olympics was the magic pixie dust that they had to sprinkle on the citizenry to get them to agree to hold this extravaganza. And unlike the imaginary capitalism way back in the day when the developers would take the big risks and they'd buy the land and they'd hope they could sell it for a profit, that's all changed now. It's as one of my colleagues he calls it privatized profit socialized debt. So in other words, all these mega projects, whether it's the convention center, whether it's the RAV line, whether it's all the developments that are going on, it's you paying for it and them making the profit. So that's what that's about at the local level. It's not about sports per se. And for the IOC, it's really not about sports so much anymore, because the IOC has morphed over the years, and it was never a particularly democratic or charitable organization, but it became a business really when a fellow named Dick Pound, who's still vice president of the IOC, took over back in 1984, and he started to bring in the television marketing rights.